Hey Bartek, do you need to screen share during this, you think?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll set you up.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the June meeting of the Community Development and Housing Committee. It is 6:35 and I will call the meeting to order right now. We have one item on our agenda for tonight, and that is a memorializing resolution brought forward by Bartek, who is joining us here. So do you want to talk about this, Bartek? I mean, it's
Yes.
pretty straightforward.
Yes, please. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. So if you recall, I had reviewed this at the Housing Committee last month, and tonight I'm before you to asking the Common Council to pass a memorializing resolution in support of this model. And this is supporting the creation of a nonprofit to implement a mixed income public development model in Kingston. So just to briefly review what you're proposed to be passing. So what the nonprofit will do, and much of this I discussed last month, the nonprofit will partner with mission-driven private and nonprofit developers to create new housing opportunities. The nonprofit will identify opportunities to leverage publicly owned land and select a private or nonprofit development partner through a competitive process. The nonprofit will establish a revolving loan fund, which can make low-cost construction loans to finance the costs of development. And by doing so, that the development won't need to seek highly competitive and limited state or federal housing subsidies. For each project that the nonprofit launches, it'll create a housing development fund corporation that would hold title to the property. The nonprofit will ensure that each project includes a mix of deeply affordable, and market rate units, so a mixed income project. And as discussed last month, these affordability requirements will be permanent and permanently attached to that project. And then finally, the nonprofit will structure each project to ensure that the nonprofit retains the authority to guide policy and management decisions when it comes to each project. And then this acknowledges that under a separate resolution, the Common Council would establish a tax abatement schedule. However, that is not what is before you tonight. I did want to finally just say that in addition to supporting the creation of this nonprofit, under Section 2, you are also calling for the bylaws of the nonprofit to provide a permanent seat on the board of directors for a member of the Common Council. And here that would be the chair of the Common Council's Housing and Community Development Committee. With that, I'll take questions, and Carol, I know you had sent some questions which I can review as well briefly, if you'd like to start there.
Sure, yeah. Let me just get up my list. In one paper. Here's your list. Oh, I printed it out because I thought it was on paper. I appreciate the idea, and of the nonprofit and its vision and what it's set up to do. I think, we need some deeply affordable units and, a good mix of different types of housing units in one project. But I do have some questions about how the revolving loan works specifically.
Mhm.
So, we can go through these one by one. Thank you for getting back to me and telling me that you would. So maybe we could just
Yep.
go.
Yeah, so number one, I think you would ask whether this would be in direct competition with the state Housing
Right.
Development Fund Corp. So I'm honestly not too familiar with that program. I did do some reading on it. It seems like it's to be used exclusively for all affordable projects. That's maybe what it is set up to do. And it's also obviously a statewide program. The main difference with this proposed model, right, is that it's specific. It's to serve Kingston specifically, not the entire state. And it's also each project would be mixed income. And so I think those are the two main kind of differing characteristics of this of the proposed model. But maybe you're more familiar with the state's HDFC.
Yeah, I am, to the extent that I dealt with them in affordable housing projects. But they can go up to 120%. I mean, they go from 30 to 120. And so they could be accessed for the kinds of programs that we're looking at, for the kinds of units we're looking to develop. And my concern is that because they are the state, obviously their cost of funds are going to be a lot less than the city of Kingston's. So why would
Well, for the loan from the revolving loan fund for construction, from this nonprofit, I'd imagine that the interest would be as low as possible, and probably whatever the cost of, whatever the inflation rate would be. So you're not decreasing the total value of the initial, revolving loan fund total. So I think it would be very competitive with the HDFC.
do you know what the state's credit rating is?
I don't.
Do you know what the city of Kingston's credit rating is?
No.
I just get it.
It's good, yeah. A slight difference of a negative or a positive could increase your cost of funds. And I wouldn't have to imagine that the state cost of funds are a lot cheaper than, our little small municipality.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can certainly do more research into the HDFC, and contact, the program sponsors and get those numbers for you
Okay,
as an exercise, which I think would be interesting.
so on to question 2, will the revolving loan be available for pre-development activities? Legal, architectural, design.
Soft and hard costs.
I'm sorry?
Soft and hard costs.
Soft and hard costs, so would include
Yes.
pre-development.
Yes.
Ew, that's a gift. Yeah. It's probably good. Okay. So then question number 3, once construction is complete, what entity will provide the perm loan financing? Who's going to take out the construction loan?
Yeah, so this is where I'd like to come back to you with a more specific answer and give you some of provide you with some of the financial models that the Center for Public Enterprise has been building for us for Kingston. But for the perm loan financing, there's a few different options. One of the ones that we're most hopeful about is it's a risk share program for HUD that can be accessed via HCR.
So you'd have to go through HCR.
That's right.
And would that be competitive?
I'm sorry?
You would have to go through HCR.
That's right, correct.
So would that process be competitive?
No, it's not competitive.
It's not competitive. So
It's
any,
not competitive. It's not part of the, in other words, it's not, HCR has access to this risk share program. It's not competitive in the sense that it doesn't come from the state's limited pool of subsidy housing, right? It's completely separate for that. Now, in terms of maybe you're using the word competitive, but maybe that's not the right word. Maybe the right word is rigorous, right? But it has not been described to me as competitive per se.
well, by competitive, I mean that they can't fund every revolving loan fund that would approach them.
Sure.
So there must be a way that they would distinguish between the city of Kingston's revolving loan fund, so
Well,
work with us as opposed to Mamaroneck or,
yeah, at this point, Kingston is, there's only 2 municipalities that are exploring this model in New York State.
yeah,
The other one is Syracuse.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're significantly farther ahead than them.
right. And what is the population of Syracuse?
I believe it's over 200,000.
Okay. So again, at this point, you don't have an answer for what entity will provide the perm loan financing, but you think that quite possibly would be
Right.
able to access HCR for perm loan financing.
That's right.
That's very unusual. Okay, so with the, in terms of the construction loan, would the construction loan be required to be repaid first from the perm loan proceeds? So let's say, for instance, in the model that you just laid out where HCR would provide the perm loan, would the construction loan be required to be repaid out of the perm loan first?
This is I believe so, but I'm going to get back to you to confirm once I touch base with Center for Public Enterprise on the financial model. But the intent of the revolving loan fund is that once each project is stabilized, the initial loan from the revolving loan fund is repaid right back to the nonprofit, so it can be used for another project.
And by stabilized, you mean, certificate of occupancy has been issued?
Yep, and leased up.
And then the next question is, are developer fees permitted? And if so, at what level?
Can you describe what you mean by developer fees here? Are you referring to our rec fee, for example?
No. I'm referring to if you partner with a private developer or a not-for-profit developer for that matter, they usually require a developer's fee, I think of like 3% of the total project cost. I don't know that if it's going up or down, or, you've contemplated what the developer's fees, a cap, what that would look like. Because in other words, we're paying a private developer to pursue this, and we're allowing them developer fees. And so I'm wondering if this is the right way to pay developer fee. It makes no sense to me that the city would be straddled with paying, in addition to the construction loan, all the developer fees that go into bringing a project to the point where it can be, well, that's where you would use the word stabilized, once it's leased up.
Yep.
Right, and so that's when it's stabilized. So it would seem that the developer's fees would be yet another gift and would add to the cost of the project. So a developer fee, for instance, if the construction loan is, say, $20 million, the developer fees, even for not-for-profits, are usually set at 3%. So that's quite a bit of money that in effect, the revolving fund would be paying for, which is to say the city of Kingston would be paying for. So it seems to me like we should have some sort of a cap.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yep, and I don't see that in our current financial model, so I can get back to you to confirm if that's incorporated at all and what the percentage would be.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, question number 6, could this fund be used in tandem with historic tax credits, or is it just for new construction?
It's intended only for new construction.
Okay.
Yep.
So if I were to repurpose or have an adaptive use for an existing building, this is not, this revolving loan fund could not be used because, even though there are construction expenses.
I
it could
mean,
not be used.
yeah, I mean, I guess in all honesty, I wouldn't want to rule it out per se, but where this model has been used successfully is for new construction specifically, so that would be the aim here as well.
Okay, number 7, would there have to be a public referendum for a bond issuance used to initially capitalize the revolving loan fund?
Right. So at this point, we're not, I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with the bonding process for a use case like this. However, to be clear, there's currently no request from the Common Council to consider bonding for this model. So that would have to be explored at a later time if and when that happens.
So where would the monies come from for this revolving loan fund? How would it be initially capitalized, if not by bond?
We're looking at all the options that are on the table. And once I have a better idea or clearer idea, I'll come back to the Common Council, should there be any further requests. You're correct, though, that in Montgomery County, where this model was first used, they did initially capitalize the revolving loan fund via a bond measure. And then, after the first project was stabilized, they increased the bonding amount to increase the size of the revolving loan fund. So you're correct that that has been used prior, but that's not currently before you.
What have you contemplated, what funding have you contemplated would start up this revolving loan fund? Are you looking at private investors? Are you looking at foundation money? Are you looking at,
Yeah.
what?
So to give you an idea,
Expenses?
another just to give you another example is Chattanooga, which is also pursuing, and Tennessee, which is also pursuing their model. In this case, they took all of the ARPA funds that they had earmarked for housing and put those entirely into the revolving loan fund, and are now seeking further philanthropic dollars to increase the size of their fund. Right. So for better or for worse, right, there's no unobligated ARPA funds. But the point being is that there are other kind of pathways to raising the funds that would make for a meaningful loan fund.
Okay, question number 8. So let me start from the back. Let's assume that okay, so a construction loan, a typical construction loan for a medium-sized multifamily housing project could come in at $15 to $20 million. And let's say we had 2 of those. Or do you just intend to do one at a time and have it repay itself?
There is a scenario which, depending on the scale of the project, the nonprofit does more than one at a time.
Okay, so more than one would mean $20 million plus.
So this is where I'd like to come back to you with more information about the financial model separately, because for the construction financing, the revolving loan fund contribution is not intended to make up 100% of the total financing for that construction loan. It's more about 20%. And so in that scenario, based on our financial model, for example, a revolving loan fund of about $12 million would help support about up to 200 housing units.
See how many? I'm
Up to
sorry,
200 housing units
200 house.
in the first round. Yep.
Okay, so you just said that it's only meant to, the revolving loan fund is only meant to fund 20% of the construction costs?
Mhm.
Okay, so if you're not requiring the private developers to have an equity participation,
We are
You-
requiring an equity participation.
okay, I'm a little confused now because in one of the in the memorializing resolution, it says like, whereas the municipal nonprofit will establish a revolving loan fund which can make low-cost construction loans to finance the costs of development, allowing developers to avoid having to seek private equity and or pursue limited public, state, or federal subsidies. So you're making it comfortable for private developers and for that matter, nonprofit developers, because they don't have to seek private equity. In other words, you're trying to encourage the development of affordable housing units, and in so doing, you're looking to take away this equity participation from private developers. So what's their skin in the game, is my point.
The developer does have to provide equity in the project. So I'm not sure I understand your point. All
just-
that whereas is saying is that they won't have to seek high cost loans for their projects from private equity investors or via competitive public subsidies for affordable housing.
So Bartek, so say we're giving a 20% construction loan versus a developer getting low income housing tax credits. Are low housing income tax credits for construction or for like the life of the person?
Construction.
For construction only? Oh.
I don't know specifically if it's the different, I would have to get back to you on that, Michelle.
Okay.
I don't monopolize this, but I got to see your choice. So I guess that sort of segues into question number 9, which is why the city of Kingston would in effect subsidize private developers by, did I read, is that the same one? Okay, so what happens if there's a default? For instance, the project cannot service the debt due to lower than expected revenues.
Yeah. I'll get back to you on this one as well.
Okay.
I think obviously, for a project to work, you have to feel confident that you will be getting the rents that are in the pro forma. But in terms of what happens, right? If that happens in the context of this model, I'll get back to you.
Okay, it does go into receivership.
Done. Keep going.
No, I just did the last one is I just, and maybe you just sort of solidified my observation here. How can you physically take this on? Because you've indicated previously that you would hold a seat on the board, you would be the project manager. Is that the title?
Right. So, I've already been working on this project for over a year.
Mhm.
And so I think my goal would be to stand up this model here in Kingston. And I believe strongly I can do that as part of my responsibilities.
Well, it seems clear to me, I mean, this revolving loan fund is a very particular animal. And it requires a very special set of skills. And so I can see you doing one or the other, but I can't see you doing both.
Right, and yeah, maybe to clarify, my role here is to stand up this model, right, and make it happen. And that's something that I've been doing for over a year already. But you're absolutely correct, right, that once this nonprofit is up and running, right, it probably does need a specialized skill set to run it in the long term. And so, that is probably the case. The other, I'd again point to Chattanooga, which is a good peer for us, I believe, because they're on roughly a similar timeline. So in their case, it was also city staff and one city staff member in particular that made their nonprofit happen and to stand up the model in there. But they're at the point, right, where they're ready to start funding projects. And so the board of directors, right, and the city recognize that a specialized skill set is now needed. And so now they're hiring an executive director to run the nonprofit.
So we are in effect anticipating the additional hire for two.
Potentially, but again, the nonprofit is a separate arm of the city. But you're correct, assuming this nonprofit is successful, a dedicated executive director is likely needed. But that would be a decision of the board of directors of the nonprofit.
You can go to
So given that we'll be using city resources and potentially taking on risk, potentially with bonding, why is it that we're only doing a memorializing resolution for the council to approve this and not like directly approving this?
Because at this point, you're not being asked to bond for this model. Technically all that's happening at this point is the incorporation of the nonprofit, so this model can continue.
Does the city
No
have
other financial, there's no other financial, I'm sorry?
Does the city have authority to create a not-for-profit without legislative approval? Like, do we know from the Attorney General's office or the state controller's office?
I do have outside counsel for this project. There's no common council formal approval needed for the creation of the nonprofit.
That I'm not saying anything negative about our administration or this council, but I just think that sets a potential for issues in the future, or if this falls into the wrong hands. And so,
Wonderful.
So yeah, I had some questions about thank you, Turtle, for the financial questions. I had some questions more about the governance of it. It felt like it was an agreement of this committee last month that we would get appointments to the board. This is one ex officio appointment. I'm a little disappointed in that. So could you go over the makeup of the board of directors?
There's no proposed makeup of the board of directors at this point. That has not been decided at any time, nor has the process for appointing the board of directors been written down or solidified. That's all on the table.
So I think we should get at least half of the appointments to this board. And I also think they should be votes or the majority leader gets to choose them. I think, because right now, as it's written, the chair of the Housing and Development Committee gets a seat. That's really ultimately just the choice of the council president, not the choice of any of us here in this room. And so there's a world where we're all one party and the council president is another party, and whoever they make is a radically different choice than necessarily our majority leader or a simple resolution. I also think we should be appointing more of the board seats by resolution. And I would like to see some tenant representation eventually when a project gets built. And I was curious about what that vision is of when these projects are constructed, the governance of the projects. Will there be like a sort of co-op board or what to determine for the tenants to determine their own sort of
Yeah. So I
neighborhood?
do have an inquiry out to some of the other completed projects to get some information on some of the other models here. But there's no specific, there's nothing specific that I have in mind for that kind of governance at this point.
Yeah, my question is really the same, sort of follows Michael's, which is, I would like to know what the governance structure of the board, yeah, what is the composition of the board of directors? It's hard to vote to set up a nonprofit, and we have no idea what it's going to look like.
Right.
mean,
Well, I mean, yeah.
In the case.
At this point, right, if this committee has thoughts on the appointment process and how that should, how that should go for this nonprofit, that should be included in the resolution. Again, there's no specific process that I'm currently thinking about for this nonprofit. It is something that with my outside counsel for this project, I am discussing about how to set up this nonprofit for success, obviously with the appropriate checks and balances, for the long term. But there's nothing specific in mind other than including the chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee.
Yeah, I would like to see more specifics, actually. And also how the time frame. I mean, I've helped to set up nonprofits before, and there's a long time frame that's involved to set them up. Federal tax exemption, state tax exemption. I'd just be curious to find out whether there's a streamlined process, how you think this nonprofit, what the guidance you've been given in terms of how this could be set up in terms of the timeline.
You mean like formally to be incorporated, like via the
Well,
IRS?
Incorporated, right?
Yeah. So I have heard that process to go through the IRS at this moment is on average 4 to 8 months.
Yeah, and usually longer. I mean, say my experience has been it's about a year or more to actually make it through the IRS approval process, and that was even before the current situation.
Or everybody go fundraise.
Right. So I think that's also my concern, is just the timeline. Yeah, I'd like to have more information before we go ahead and formalize saying we are going to set up this nonprofit. What's it going to look like? How's it going to be set up? There's more specific information.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously very fair. And I'm happy to provide, some further thoughts. I will just, the intent of this resolution is really just the big picture side of things. This is a model that has worked elsewhere in the country. This is a model that can be replicated in Kingston, that leads to mixed income projects with deeply affordable and market rate units. We have the Center for Public Enterprise, which is the consultant on this project, knows this model inside and out. And the intent of this resolution is to just the Common Council showing its support for this model and pursuing it. If this committee would like to hold off on that until more specific information is gathered about the operations and board appointments, I'm happy to go through that process and come back to the committee.
Ready?
Bartek, what relationship would this particular entity have with the land bank, if any?
I do not believe it would have a relationship with the land bank.
Would there be a bar to somebody serving on both boards of directors?
I don't believe so. But obviously if there was a concern for that, right, it could be written into the bylaws that
Okay.
no board members from the Kingston City Land Bank can serve on this nonprofit board, et cetera.
What would be what's typical for the ethical controls in terms of the revolving loan? Would this be under like the state comptroller, or is there some other body that would be ensuring that all of the practices were financially on the up and up?
Yeah, this, it would be subject to annual audits.
The annual what?
Audits.
Audits.
Is performed by whom?
Likely an external firm.
An external firm, okay.
Similar to the, how the city's audit works and how the land bank's audit works as well.
Okay, and then you've mentioned that Chattanooga is pursuing this, but you've also noted some other places. Can you give me a couple of other towns, especially ones that might be actually have put this into practice?
Yeah, so Atlanta is also doing it through the Atlanta Urban Development Corporation. Montgomery County, Maryland, is the first jurisdiction, and they have actually put this into practice. Raleigh, North Carolina is also pursuing this. And then, as I mentioned, Syracuse in New York State is also in the early stages of exploring this. And I can get you additional examples, Rennie, as well.
Okay, and
These are
then
the ones off the top of my head.
the group that you mentioned that's spearheading these kinds of projects is the Center for Public Enterprise?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Would it behoove us to have a presentation directly from them on this issue?
Absolutely. I can invite them to a future meeting.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Michael.
So regarding questions on the actual development and land use. So the third whereas says partner with mission driven private. Could you explain what that means to me? Because it's not the mission of the private to make as much money as possible.
Mission-driven private developers, are those that, for me, see the value of having a mixed income project that have deeply affordable units included within, right? That might not be every single developer, but I think a developer that would want to partner with the nonprofit on a project like this, I would define as mission-driven.
So when you previously presented to us, you also talked about assisting floundering existing proposed developments. Have you had those conversations yet? And do you have a picture of what that actually looks like? Or does this development corporation become the majority owner? Are we just sort of helping a project get its wings?
Right.
What does that look like for floundering?
Right. So this is how this model first came to being in Montgomery County, was via a market rate project that needed financing help. And so in that case, the agency in Maryland came to the private developer. They both agreed that this would help the project move, happen. And so in that case, the public agency did take majority ownership over the project. So the nature of the project completely changed, right? It was no longer a private-led development. It now was under this public development sphere. So if there is a market rate project in Kingston that, would benefit from a model like this, that would also happen here, right? Where this would become then a majority public owned project.
So would they be eligible to receive pilot agreements? Because now they're not for profit, right? They wouldn't pay any taxes.
Right. So in that case, the HDFC would hold title to the project, not the developer. And so
Okay.
this common council will be, again, if the council believes in this kind of model or supports this model, separately, the council will be asked to set a tax abatement schedule for projects under the public mixed income development model. But again, that's separately and down the line.
And so any like the building super, any employees of these buildings, would they be city employees or would they be employees of this non-for-profit?
In terms of the management, so the nonprofit is not intended to do the day-to-day management, so no city employees would be involved or anything.
I'm sorry, no city employees?
No,
So they would be employed, so anybody working on the maintenance guy is gonna be employed by the private
or a
partnership,
management company.
by the, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, but like by a management company, for example, right?
And would the development corporation be contracting with this management company or?
Again, I assume so, probably, but I'm not sure because that's really down the line in terms of how this model works.
Well, I only ask because if they're city employees, then that's gonna, you know, not hiring them through the non-for-profit is sort of a way to get around paying people a fair wage. That happens a lot. And I hear the question, but there's somebody else has a question. Maybe I'll remember it.
So I guess hearing you talk, it's reminding me a lot of the sort of arrangement that occurs at Stony Run right now, because they have a housing development fund that's sort of running it. But, and I have to say, it's not been doing a good job in terms of keeping things going there. And so there's also a lot of there's no transparency in terms of how it's set up and who's making decisions and, what the city's relationship is. And so I guess, having sort of witnessed that from a distance, it would be, I would like to see more clarity here and transparency about how this nonprofit is going to be working with the for-profit partners and with the city.
Right. I mean, sure. Right. To clarify, that this arrangement, you're correct, would also be an HDFC that's created that would hold title to the property. But this is we're talking about not private ownership, right? This is or private entity, right? It's created the HDFC in Stony Run's case. In this case, right, it's the public sector creating the HDFC. So, in terms of oversight and transparency, as it's arranged, it's proposed to be completely different from maybe the experience that you're seeing in Stony Run.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just sort of curious to see what the relationship is between the public sector and the Housing Development Corporation as it's set up in terms of oversight. And that's getting back to the question of what is the board of directors? Are there city staff? Are there, how is it composed so that we could actually ensure that the functioning is something that we feel is competent, appropriate, fair. So just a follow up to the other questions that people have already been asking.
What is the scale of this project going to be? How many units are we talking per development that this corporation would be seeking to?
Yeah. Well, I think what's great about this model is that it can be scaled up or down. In our kind of typical project and financial model, it is a 100 unit project. However, it can be scaled way down, right? If there was a good project for this model to take on.
So I understand for the smaller projects that it's harder to find the wiggle room. But if we're doing 100 unit projects, could we not also include the mix to be supportive housing for those currently facing homelessness or living in temporary assistance?
Yeah, do you have a specific program in mind, or just in general supportive housing?
In general, I mean, we could always partner with our partner organizations, but
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea.
like out of 100, I think even if one or two were supportive, I think it would not drastically increase the cost.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I think that's right. That's something that the nonprofit, right, will be empowered to ask or include in the total makeup of a project.
Michelle.
So I had sent you questions, regarding, tenant protections, like, ETPA. Because 421A in New York City, new construction can be ETPA, but you had said that shifting, administrative authority to DHCR would undermine the core principle of the local public accountability of this model, and the benefit of the model is local public oversight of the building. So what does local public oversight look like to you? Like, will we be holding the lists to see like who gets an apartment, an affordable apartment, or is that going to still be left to the developers?
Well, again, the nonprofit has the majority ownership over a particular project. So that's the kind of key differentiating factor here is that the nonprofit has majority stake to set and make management decisions and operations over the project. Sort of that's why, because there's already this local kind of public oversight, that's why I was skeptical of the idea, to be honest with you.
But if we don't know who the board of directors is going to be, it really just seems like we're privatizing the benefits and socializing the costs. Like the city is gonna be on the hook for all of this when you have yet to see where the public oversight of it is. Like, I believe in public housing, but this is
Sure. I mean,
I can very easily turn into the illusion of public housing.
okay. I mean, I can happily come back to this committee with further details and a proposed makeup.
Yeah, and I think your, the invitation of folks from the Center for Creative Enterprise, having them come and speak to us about how it works, in other places where it's already been set up, so that we're looking at real models that have, that are really in operation to see how it works. I think that would be helpful, because I think the concept sounds great, if we could, if we could see what we're actually sort of approving or getting into. But I like the idea of being able to build affordable housing, here in the city, being able to facilitate it more than we already can, if it's possible in a way that's fair to the taxpayers, to the people who are living there. So I'd be very interested in hearing someone from that center come and speak.
Okay.
So thank you for arranging that.
And I asked this in the email as well, but I just want to reiterate, I really also want to know who will be determining the rent increases every year, or I should say rent adjustments every year. Is that going to be the rent guidelines board, or is that going to be the board of directors itself? Is that going to be the tenants coming to a determination? Because is there a ceiling in which it can be raised? I think they would fall. No, they wouldn't fall under good cause eviction right now because they're too new.
Right.
So,
Right.
we can move in, and then this board of directors could slap them with a 15% rent increase the next year. So I would like to see more guardrails or guidelines to ensure that the tenants can have some longevity in the place.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't have a great answer for that, other than to say, in the other projects, again, because of the public ownership, the tenants, including those market rate tenants that are in those apartments, right, have much greater protections than the general public, right, because of the public oversight. So I see no reason why that wouldn't also be the case here, but I don't have a specific answer. It's too early, and too early for me to answer that.
Okay.
Montgomery County has stabilization.
Anyone else? Yes.
And then when they pay the rent, I would assume there's some kind of split. So the partnership between the private organization and this development corporation, but does their rents then go into the fund to create more units, or is it by building, so it goes to the improvement of the building?
In that case, it would go back into the building, because the revolving loan fund portion of the contribution is paid back once the building is complete and kind of.
But actually, what happens is that the proceeds from the rent, which is considered the revenue for the buildings, go to pay back the perm loan. It's usually a period of 20 to 30 years that it's repaid. And during this time, there will be reserve funds that will have to have been set up so that if something falls apart, if the elevator stops working, if appliances need to be replaced, you can access that reserve fund. But those monies, there should be not a dime left over that does not go back to pay them. Which is why it's so important that they be fully occupied, because that's what your projections are based on. So, which is why I was asking what happens if, for whatever reason, our projections don't hold true, like everybody does not want to live in Kingston. And you have a half full apartment complex that the city is now on the hook for repay, when I say the city, I mean the taxpayers are now on the hook for, because we will have to repay that bond, or we will have to take ownership of that building and be responsible, for the maintenance and operation of that building and the cost thereof. So, again, I think on paper, it's a wonderful concept, but I think that it probably works well in much larger communities, which is probably why Kingston is the second one to go after it, because that's what we do.
Have we given you enough questions?
Anyone else? Everybody good? Go ahead.
Procedural question. Who submitted this resolution? Was it Bartek?
Do what?
Who submitted the resolution?
It was me.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
So, would you be all right with withdrawing the resolution so that we don't vote on it at this point? Because I don't think that we have enough answers to really be able to go through with a reasoned vote.
Can it be tabled?
Well, it hasn't been voted on, so you don't table something that's not voted on. We can put it on old business. Which would be, that would be equivalent to saying, yeah. Just leave it on as old business.
And that's what I was gonna say. I mean, there seems to be a lot of questions here. I mean, the resolution is, I shouldn't say simply, but it's simply to show support for the creation of this. There seems to be a lot of questions here on the actual creation. So it's up to us whether we want to show support of this or we want to wait until a lot of these questions are answered. That's kind of our task at hand here. So we don't have to vote on this tonight. Bartek, you can withdraw it if you want.
Yeah,
And
so
then we can look at it further down the road when you have, more information for us.
yeah, it sounds like the committee would be more comfortable if I withdrew the resolution. And so I can do that. And then I'll invite the Center for Public Enterprise to a future meeting of this committee. Terrell, I'll get back to your questions as promised with additional detail. And then it also sounds like this committee would like to hear a little bit more about the operations and also hear, see a framework. I mean, almost see a draft bylaws for how the board is going to be appointed.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me we're missing a lot of the nuts and bolts of the actual
Right.
process here.
Which, to clarify, was not right. My intention, that was on purpose, right? Was because I'm just seeking support for the general concept, but I'm happy to return with more of the nuts and bolts.
Okay. Michael?
So with this being a memorializing resolution, will this be proceeding anyway?
Yeah, I don't think they really need this to proceed. This is just showing our support for it.
Yeah, but will this proceed whether or not we vote on this?
I mean, I'll continue to work on this model as I've done for the past year. But I guess you're asking whether there's like a formal step that will happen?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Right?
I just want to say, I, for one, am supportive of the general idea. So I don't want you to get the wrong impression, at least from my point, but there are questions that I think we have to have firmer sense about before we can make an official designation of support. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone here
Yeah.
that's gonna argue this is not a good idea, the concept anyway. But there's obviously a lot of questions here. So I think I'm speaking for everyone that we feel a little more comfortable with some answers before we vote on the support. And you can move along without our support. I mean, that's just a nice thing. Randy, did you want to say something?
No.
No, I just want to thank you, Bartek, for investigating this and bringing it to us, and would encourage you to keep on investigating and keep bringing us more information. So I think it's absolutely worth investigating.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea.
So thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that,
Okay.
Anything else on the agenda?
we do not. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Anyone opposed to that?
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.